Good wishes to all our viewers on this auspicious day of Dashera today, and very special wishes for Kaivalya Dham and the entire enthusiastic team on this auspicious occasion of the 96th Foundation Day of Kaivalya Dham. Treasure moment indeed. With COVID-19, we are having this web meeting, and obviously we are meeting the grand, lush green ambience of Kaivalya Dham. Today's topic about modern medical research and effectiveness of ancient science is really very, very interesting. Ancient Indian wisdom has a tradition of about 5,000 years plus. Yoga, Ayurveda, ancient sciences have many rewards very clearly experienced clinically. The attempt is to know more and more about them through the window of contemporary known sciences. The logic of the modern scientific research had just been explained by Dr. Khalsa. When we talk about the pros and cons, there are obviously many pros with publication of yoga research into top international journals, getting the yoga protocols working into several institutions. But it is also worth knowing its limitations at the outset clearly. See, one has to be very sure about what exactly we are dealing with. The modern science on one side and the ancient Indian wisdom on the other side. The modern science essentially aims at systematic understanding of the express reality in the world around us, while the ancient wisdom is all about systematic understanding of the one who is understanding this reality. So it's a seen versus seer, as Kenopanishad very clearly makes us introspect about who the seer really is. And let me tell all of you that one has to keep at the back of your mind that an eye behind the eyepiece cannot be seen by the seer seeing through the microscope. This is the message of Kenopanishada. On this background now, let me bring to you some very interesting latest advanced researches in modern neurosurgeries, which can be correlable to the ancient Indian wisdom of yoga. Now, let me start with sharing my screen here. Yeah, this is a very interesting operation called dorsal column stimulation. See, the dorsal column has ascending tracts in the spinal cord. And this dorsal column stimulation operation, what is done is specific electrodes are neurosurgically implanted in the dorsal columns of the spinal cord. And this electrode is connected to pulse generator, which in turn is connected to a battery device. So these continuous rhythmic stimulation by this pulse ascends up, and it stimulates the reticular activating system in the brain, and then through this system of thalamocortical radiation, the entire cortex is stimulated. This is essential and useful in persistent vegetative states. See, in n number of cases when the patient is in terminal coma, say because of brain hemorrhage or head injuries, road accidents, brainstem injuries, and so on and so forth, with great morbidity and very poor chance of outcome, this operation has shown promising trials. When this original article was published in 2008 2009 by Professor Tetsu Kano from Japan, he is chair neurosurgery at the Fujita Health University, Japan. The main question which came to everybody's mind is, we are dealing with some problem in the brain, unconscious patient in persistent vegetative state, and how an operation done on the spinal cord can be a solution to this. Friends, I interacted with Professor Kano in one of the world conferences in Singapore, and we had a long discussion about how basically the initial trials were designed and how that process started as to stimulation of the dorsal columns in the spinal cord for patients of coma and persistent vegetative state. Now, there is a lot in the discussion, but to cut it short, that really brought me to the ancient Indian wisdom of yoga. See, as we are aware that Kundalini energy is present in a dormant state in the lower end of the spinal cord. When aroused, it ascends up gradually, stage wise, higher and higher into the spinal cord, and probably activates the various nuclei in the brainstem, which are associated with the reticular activation, which in turn are associated with consciousness, and they have links to thalamocortical radiation. As we know, the ancient yogis also describe the sequential activation of chakras from below upwards, from Muladhara to Swadhisthana, Swadhisthana to Manipur, to Anahat, to Vishuddhi, then to Ajna and the Sahasradhara chakra. Another important correlation could be the famous Soham Sadhana or the Ajapa Japa Mantra Vidhi. As we know, the definition of mantra is Manana Trayate iti mantraha. That chanting which protects you is mantra japa. In Ajapa Japa, one keeps depositing energies in various chakras without actually verbally chanting anything. Therefore, the name is Ajapa Japa. And on an average, we have about 21,600 breaths every day. And these breaths create energies which are deposited in various chakra in Ajapa Japa Mantra Vidhi, as is mentioned in these numbers: 600 in the Muladhara, 6,000 each at Swadhisthana, Manipur and Anahat, and 1,000 each at Vishuddhi, Agya Chakra and Sahasrara Chakra. Friends, this is a very big science itself, Ajapa Japa Mantra. But the main question of modern neurosurgical world as to how an operation done on the spinal cord can be a solution to a problem which is related to brain, that is unconsciousness in persistent vegetative state, has a lot to do with ancient Indian wisdom. And probably our ancient rishis and munis had already mastered this science without probably knowing the explanations which we are trying to dig out by the so-called modern neuroscientific methodologies. Another example I would give you of another very interesting advent in brain surgery. The name of the operation is called as vagal nerve stimulation. See, there are two systems in the body, the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. There are a lot of viewers who are joining live on the YouTube, and many might not be doctors. So let me tell a few basic things. That the sympathetic system prepares oneself for an aggressive fight and flight mode, and the parasympathetic system counterbalances this. And a dynamic equilibrium between the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system is the real key for various harmony in the body. Now, this large number of sympathetic overactivity are manifested by various cardiac dysrhythmias, various kind of gastrointestinal motility disorder, and these can be counterbalanced by stimulating the vagus nerve. And it has been proved. I mean, there is a lot of work which is being done. My point is, these latest sophisticated methodologies has come up in last say 20 or 25 years, but our rich Indian traditional wisdom of yoga has already discovered it 2,500 long years back. Rishi Patanjali, who wrote Patanjali Yoga Sutra in 4 different chapters, in the Vibhuti Pada, the Vishuddhi Chakra Sayama has been very, very clearly mentioned. And Vishuddhi Chakra is essentially in the neck. So if you Sayama on the neck, then probably you are aiming at bilateral vagal stimulations. The Sutra number 30 of Vibhuti Pada of Patanjali Yoga Sutra says, Kantha Kupe Kshut Pipasa Nivrutte, means if you meditate on the pit of the throat, then you are able to regulate the hunger and the thirst. And now people are talking about role of vagal nerve stimulation in epilepsy and in various GI disorders and irritable bowel syndrome and obesity and things like that. But the very basic fact that meditation on the pit of the throat regulating so many parasympathetic functions was known at that time. Another important point to ponder upon is during pranayam, when we do Jalandhar Bandha, the Jalandhar Bandha in pranayam again stimulates both the vagal nerve in the neck. Third point, I would like to say that specific sequential chanting of Omkaras in various ways. And we know there are various ways of chanting Omkara. There could be Pluth Omkara, there is long Omkara. There could be Nyuk Omkara, there is repetitions of Omkara. And then there could be Upanshu Omkara, which is attributed to Madhyama. So a series of sequential Omkara chanting, Pluth, Nyuk and Upanshu Omkara, can establish a dynamic balance between the two vagal nerve nuclei. And friends, there is a very important paper which scientifically talks about this polyvagal therapy. This paper has come up just a couple of years back and has been published in the Frontiers of Human Neurosciences in February 2018 by Marlisa Sullivan from the Maryland University of Integrative Health. This paper talks about ventral vagal nucleus, which has connections with the chest, dorsal vagal nucleus, which has got connection with the gastrointestinal system, and there is an intermediate vagal nucleus, which deals with emotions, facial expressions, and essentially counterbalancing the sympathetic overactivity. And as we know, yoga is all about autonomic optimization. Interesting point is, this paper very elaborately talks about the work which they have done on behavior and vagal nuclei. Sattva guna corresponds to ventral vagal nucleus. The dorsal vagal nucleus corresponds to tamasa behavior. And as we know, the rajasa behavior is corresponding with the sympathetic activity. And essentially, the balance between these two, the dynamic balance between the various vagal nuclei, the various parasympathetic origins, and the sympathetic system brings about a behavioral balance and the real balance between body and mind. And this body-mind balance, the resilience, is the real key. Now, we have very limited time of 15 minutes. So I wish to offer whatever best I can to you in these 15 minutes. So let's move on to the next. Another next surgery is something very interesting, which is a neuromodulation neurosurgery. See, neuromodulation is another very interesting surgery, which involves putting lids on the cerebral cortex directly by doing surgery here. These lids are connected to decoder, and this decoder is connected to an executor limb, which is connected to various muscle groups. Now, in patients with complete transections of the spinal cord, see, with various vertebral fractures or various other kind of things where the cervical cord is not working, the impulse from the brain cannot reach the limbs. Therefore, there is complete paralysis of all the limbs. So the impulse can alternatively reach through this particular track, and the person is able to move his limbs. This could be a very major breakthrough. One step further is seen on this particular picture, where we can have sensors in the executive limb, and these sensors can be connected to various encoders to get feedback from the various limb receptors to the brain, which in turn can create a dynamic balance between the afferent and the efferent limb. The point I'm making is modifying the brain circuits for optimizing the behavioral responses. And this is a very, very major development. But friends, balancing the electric circuits in the brain, balancing the different lobes of the brain, balancing various hemispheres of the brain was very, very well known to our ancient Indian rishis. What is pranayam? Pranayam is essentially stabilizing the dynamic interaction between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. What is pratyahar? We withdraw from the lust. Lust is essentially an emotion in the temporal lobe. And how do we withdraw? We teach the pros and cons, and the withdrawal is essentially an influence of the frontal cortex over the temporal lobe. So again, a balance between the frontal and the temporal lobe. What is pratipaksha bhavana? Pratipaksha bhavana again indicates a good control of temporal lobe emotions by the frontal lobe intelligence. When you reach a stage of dhyana, it is essentially a balance between the executive brain, which is the dorsolateral premotor cortex, and the emotional networks in the limbic system, which involves hippocampus, parahippocampus, gyrus, amygdala, and so on. The point is, we have to have an executive intellectual control over the emotional reaction, so that a knee-jerk limbic reaction to any stimulus can be balanced. We are talking about pratikriya versus pratisad, differential responses, and this can be achieved by yoga without doing all these kind of complex operations. Now, coming to the conventional yoga research in various fields of neurosciences, we have a self-help group on epilepsy at Karandikar Hospital and Neurosciences Research Center, and we have published several advantages of yoga in patients in the treatment of epilepsy way back in 2006. Yoga is extremely essential in patients who need a multi-drug therapy for management of epilepsy. Yoga helps maintain drug levels, and also the required drug dosages can be reduced. The duration of treatment in patients of epilepsy can also be reduced if you have an conjoined treatment with epilepsy. And pranayama in particular can stabilize the EEG patterns of various patients of epilepsy. Let us be brief. There are several research publications in modern sciences which underlines the usefulness of yoga in the management of stroke, migraine, multiple sclerosis, high blood pressure, ischemic heart disease, Parkinson's disease, Guillain-Barré syndrome, anxiety, depression, stress management, aging, memory, learning, and so on and so forth. I will just quickly scroll through some important papers. This was a publication in 2013, the structural effects on gray matter yoga. The hippocampal volume has been restored. So neuroprotective effect of yoga has been proven. If you see here, the gray matter volume is shown in this graph. Very useful in patients with dementia. Yoga is useful in Parkinsonism for reducing the risk of falls, for balancing the gait of patients, for reducing the tremors, and bringing a better quality of life in patients with Parkinson's. Now, there are limitations in yoga research, as has been already mentioned by Dr. Khalsa and a few speakers yesterday. Developing a module, then multiple centers having different kind of studies. Double blinding is a very big challenge in randomized control trials. Certain yoga schools have copyrights of their own protocols and so on and so forth. I think the time is very limited, so I will not go into much details of this. The possible solutions for these limitations could be joining hands, that is integrated medicine or interpathy. Ayurveda, homeopathy, yogic sciences, and modern scientists should join hand, and such approach we have designed for the state of Maharashtra at the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. I'm an active member of the interpathy committee of the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, and we are trying to bring in more and more integration at different levels, from schools, colleges, various yoga centers, and various research organizations to bring in this particular research. Now, establishing an adequate research base, proper expertise, proper leadership development is also very essential. If specific criteria could be designed, it could be of great help. And developing yoga universities separately could be a real clue for further development. Now, one point I would like to highlight is about the way yoga is perceived by many yoga therapists also. Yoga essentially means Ashtanga Yoga had got 8 components. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam are the foundations on which you can build up the so-called Antar Yoga of Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi. And it is very essential for various research protocols to be followed on these lines, because just physical yoga and asana is only one very small part of this. Choice of patients selected for particular studies also is very important. Choice of yoga protocols design also should aim at doing no harm to the patient. Curative versus adjuvant yoga protocols, particularly when, as Dr. Khalsa just said, that the highest number of research papers are in the field of cancer. So many people are under wrong impression that yoga is sort of going to cure their cancer. So curative role of yoga versus adjuvant role of yoga therapy has to be underlined. And integration with the treating clinician is also extremely essential. Friends, I would summarize and end with one shloka in Gita, which talks about the real meaning of yoga. The Sankhya Yoga, chapter 2 of Gita, verse number 48 says that yoga, true yoga, is defined as samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam is homeostasis, the real balance between the various components of the body-mind complex. And that's the real yoga. And our ancient rishis essentially highlighted these kind of yogas, and the first 4 stages of Bahir Yoga used to be foundational, and then Pratyahar onwards was the real yoga. And this ancient Indian wisdom was really very well developed ultra modern science, and more details of this ultra modern science have to be unleashed. Our yogic rishis were really great scientists who probably, if you think, would realize that had a lot of contemplative and introductions of various things which are beyond materialism and causality. See, everything, if you look through the narrow window of materialism and causality, would put limitations on you. Yoga is an ocean, and there is huge amount to be unleashed. And it is comparable, friends, to, those rishis probably were aware of the real concept of one singular universal consciousness, and those innovative ideas which used to strike them, like the helical structure of DNA and so on and so forth, was probably an ability to download ideas from the singular universal consciousness, like we download from a Google Drive, isn't it? Whatever file we want, we just download from the Google Drive and we have access to our drive. Similarly, they had access to the real truth, the real one singular universal consciousness. Therefore, they could have a dynamic communication with the real truth, and they could come up with the ideas. Kenopanishad has summarized this by saying that consciousness is the real canvas on which thoughts are projected. And if all yoga therapists for treatment of yogas and all yoga researchers and all people who are working in yoga research have this kind of a foundation, then probably they would be very committed and dedicated to an integral approach to a body-mind intellect complex. And this can really bring in the real transformation within us. And if an individual is transformed from within, then that is a transformation in Vyashti. And a good Vyashti transformation can surely bring in an excellent Samashti transformation, because fundamentally your outlook to look at the world changes with yoga. As Ishavasya Upanishad had said.
Dr. Karandikar?
Yeah?
I'm
summarizing in last 1 minute.
I have to interrupt you. We have exceeded the time. We have to stop here. I'm so sorry about that.
I will conclude
thank you so much for presenting that novel view, wherein you have explained how yoga and neuroscience and neurosurgical science can contribute to each other. And that's such a lovely presentation.